Hey guys, it's Friday, February the 10th, 2023, and I am cooking a beef pot roast for supper tonight. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to use this as my object lesson because something amazing happened this week and I have to share it with you. Now I have a little bit of a cold, so if I cough some and sniffle during this message, just forgive me. But I want to bring something to your attention. Many of you have probably heard this. There's a new teaching. I guess it's new. It could be a new twist on an old teaching, but it's about how those that truly follow Yahushua should become vegetarian. Now, what they're saying is that Yeshua and his disciples were vegetarian, and any biblical account of them eating meat or fish or anything else was falsely inserted as a deception. I had someone email me about that even just this week, saying that it was all falsely inserted. Now, the Bible accounts are clear, guys. The disciples were fishermen, all right? What do you do with fish if you're not going to eat them? I mean, those weren't used for sacrifices that I know of. We know Yeshua fed the fish with the bread to 5,000 hungry people. Yeshua, we're told, ate boiled fish after his resurrection, and he even cooked fish to feed his disciples in John 21. Now, I know that fish isn't necessarily considered beef or meat, but I'm going to go over a couple of other things for you that we've got to be wary of anything that contradicts what we are given as instructions from Yahushua, from Yahweh, and his Old Testament prophets. So there is instruction from Yahweh to eat lambs at Passover. And then there's also a list of clean meats for food in Leviticus 11. Now, we also know Yahweh gave quail for meat to the children in the wilderness to eat. He gave too much of a good thing because it says, you want meat? I'll give you meat. He gave it to them until they were sick of it. But I think he has a sense of humor there. Anyway, we know Noah was told to eat of the clean meat animals for food, and that's in Genesis 9. Now, one of the places that people will cite in support of vegetarian diet is Daniel is given as that example. And that we're to be vegetarian because he gave us that example. But, you know, he even tells us, Daniel tells us specifically in his account that the food that the king was giving to these young men was unhealthy. They didn't trust the meat. And perhaps we can't trust the meat we get from our stores, but I live on a farm and we raise most of our own meat, and what we don't raise, I get from kosher sources. So I just want you guys to be aware of this teaching that's going around. So because I'd gotten that email from this other person, I take everything to the Father in prayer. I don't trust my own understanding of anything. And so I was praying about this, and I was asking him if this is something that I should consider, and let him confirm it or tell me to reject this new teaching. And immediately, guys, I heard in my spirit the title of this video. I heard him say, even the angels ate meat. And as soon as I heard this, I was immediately reminded or brought to mind the story of Abraham when he met with the three quote-unquote men in Genesis 18. Now, I went and looked that up right away because I wanted to see if what I'd heard was true and from the Father. And I would encourage you guys to do the same thing. I'm going to read some of these verses to you in Genesis 18. And it says, and this is the King James Version, I don't like to use the word the Lord, but anywhere you hear the Lord spoken, that's Yahweh, that is Jehovah. And Jehovah appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he said in the tent door, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he, Abraham, lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. And he said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. And so it tells us he goes on to tell Sarah to make some bread, and Abraham, in verse 6, hastens into the tent. In 7, Abraham ran into the herd and fetched a calf, tender and good. A calf. A meat cow. Okay, calf tender and good, and gave it to a young man, and he hastened to dress it. And he took butter and milk and the calf, which he had dressed, and set it before them, meaning these three quote-unquote men. And he stood by them under the tree, and I want you to look at that last part of verse 8. And they did eat. They ate this meat and the bread that Sarah and Abraham had prepared for them. Now, how do we know that these were angels? We know two of them were. And I'm going to continue to read on down for you, because we're told in that account that there were three there. And two of them turned and went to Sodom. This is in Genesis 18, verse 22. Two of the three quote-unquote men turned and went to Sodom. But Yahweh stayed behind to speak with Abraham and tell him what his plans were to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, you guys go read this, because what that's saying right there is that of the three quote-unquote men, Yahweh was one of them. He remained behind to speak with Abraham while the other two went to Sodom. And we're told in Genesis 19:1 that those two that went on to Sodom were angels. Okay, so what we're told right there is that these three quote-unquote men, two of which were angels and one was Yahweh himself, ate the calf, the meat that Abraham had prepared for them. And I would ask you to recall the story when people tell you that eating meat is sinful. Okay, and for those that want to try to argue, well, this story is made up and added in, you're just going to have to take that to the Father in prayer. Okay, pray about this in all things, guys, but there's enough scriptural support for eating meat, if it's okay for the angels and for Yahweh himself to partake of the meat that was prepared for them. Right there from Genesis 18. Okay, then it's good enough for us. We've got to pray on everything that we hear. Everything. Now, Yeshua goes on to warn two of the churches in Revelation. That's Pergamum and Thyatira. He warns them against eating things sacrificed to idols. Now, what things are sacrificed if not meat? Right? I mean, you don't sacrifice fruit and vegetables or nuts. You sacrifice meat. Now, that would have been a perfect opportunity for Yeshua to say, to warn those churches that were eating any kind of meat. But he specifically mentions meat sacrificed unto idols. Things sacrificed unto idols, which we know is meat. All right, and another thing that the Father has brought to mind several times when I've wondered about things like this, it's Matthew 15:11, right? Yeshua says it is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out of his mouth that defiles him. Because what comes out of his mouth comes from his heart, right? We're told it's out of the abundance of the mouth, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. This is another kind of telling of that. So it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but I would encourage you, pray on everything you eat. Goodness, in today's day and age, we don't even know if the fruit we're eating isn't genetically modified. Everything has been tampered with. So pray on everything that you eat. But for those of you that are feeling convicted about whether or not you should just go full-bore vegetarian, ask the Father to confirm that for you. It may be that we need the protein from the meat, and this is why he's provided it. So you guys just pray on that. I do know this, and this is what makes me a little suspicious of this new teaching. Gates and the WEF would love it if every one of us stopped eating meat. They've made that point very clear. All right, that's what raises suspicion for me about this new teaching, is that that's part of Satan's agenda. They're telling us. And so we've got scripture that supports the eating of clean meat. Pray on everything that you put in your mouth. Pray on every teaching that you hear. Don't take that teaching and run to some learned elder who's going to give you what he was taught in seminary or something given to him by a deceiving spirit. We don't know. So we do know that we can trust the Father to lead and guide us as long as we don't lean on our own understanding. We just need to let him guide us in all things. Guys, thank you for listening. Pray on this and go read that account in Genesis 18 for your own confirmation, okay? Y'all have a great evening. Have a great day.